Hello, welcome to Read Through the Word. Today is Saturday, March 15th, and we are in the book of Deuteronomy. Thanks for joining us here today. I hope you are having a really great day. I hope this is the start of a good weekend for you, and that you're able to take time and to study the text of the Bible and to listen to all the things Jesus wants to speak to you. So today our key verse is Deuteronomy 10, 12 through 14. And the name of our lesson is What Love Looks Like. So Deuteronomy 10, 12 through 14 says, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? He requires only that you fear the Lord your God and live in a way that pleases him and love him and serve him with all your heart and soul. And you must always obey the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. Look, the highest heavens and the earth and everything in it all belong to the Lord your God." So in this particular section of Deuteronomy, Moses is reminding Israel what God expects of them in their covenant relationship. And that was not unusual just in general in covenants, whether, we've talked about covenants were not an original idea to the Israelites. They were a part of ancient Near Eastern society. And it was not unusual for the two parties in a covenant to, affirm this is what our covenant says. This is what I'm expected to do. This is what you're expected to do. These are the terms of the covenant. So this is not unusual in any kind of sort of covenant relationship, either sacred or secular at this time, for the terms of the covenant to be reaffirmed. And Moses is doing that and talking about, this is what God expects of you because you're in a covenant relationship with him. So what are some of the things he expected of them and that he expects of us? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. In general, the gods of the ancient Near East didn't seek love. We don't see evidence in history that they're this God of love that's seeking a special kind of covenant with their people, as Yahweh did. The Lord was absolutely unique in that his entrance into covenant with his people was based on love, and that he expressed his love for his people and expressed a desire for his people to love him in return. That's very different than other pagan cultures who very much were just seeking to appease their God, not necessarily be in relationship with that God. The sacrifices, the prayers, the things that these pagan cultures did were much more based on a system of appeasement, to keep the God happy, to make the gods happy so that they would get what they needed, whether it was victory in war or a good harvest or, whatever it was. There were a lot of different ways that they would try to appease these gods and get what they wanted. But the God of Israel was a relational God. The covenant wasn't just a contract. You do this, I do that. God stepped in and said, I will be in relationship with you. I will dwell with you. I dwell with you. This God dwells with us. And that was unique. And God wanted his people to remember that. He wanted us to remember everything belongs to God. All of it. It all belongs to God. What are we supposed to do with our time, with our resources, with our money? It all belongs to God. He said, set apart your hearts to God, who is the Lord of Lords. Like, he didn't want them getting caught up in some of these other rituals that forgot that God was a relational God. Another way that God was different that was outlined here is that God does not accept bribes. From the IVP Bible Background Commentary, it says, in the religious beliefs of the ancient Near East, the gods could be manipulated because they were believed to have needs. By providing the food, clothing, and shelter that the gods needed, an individual could win the favor of the deity. This also reflects the picture of Yahweh as a just judge who refuses to distort justice for personal gain. In other words, these people, the Israelites, were being told, you don't have to do all this stuff to win his favor. He's not some unjust God who's like, hey, if I get this from you, you might get that. God was just and he was loving. And we know this to be true also. God always gives more than we could ever give or imagine what we could give. Because that's the kind of God he was and is. That's the kind of God that the Israelites were learning, that's who he was and is. He called on them to defend the fatherless, the widow, love the alien, provide them with food and clothing, fear God and serve him. Praise God who performs wonders and miracles. In other words, don't forget what you know God has done. Don't forget these amazing wonders and miracles, because in the future, when you're looking at another impossible situation, you're going to want to remember, wait, I've seen impossibility before. I've been to the Red Sea before, or I've been to, we have been in this place of impossibility before. And God did miracles and wonders. He made a way through the impossible to make it possible. And he wanted his people to remember that. He said, do not worship God in the same way that false gods are worshipped. So some of the particulars in how he wanted the altar built, and, obviously didn't want them to have the Asherah poles or be in places, worship in places associated with Canaanite gods. Some of the particulars of how they worshipped or sacrificed or where the altars could be or not be were, those rules were not just like rules for the sake of rules, like do this to make me happy. It was because God was continually trying to communicate with Israel, you're different. You're different and I'm different. And so you're going to worship in a way that doesn't look like it's intertwining with ways of worshiping pagan gods. And again, the biggest underlying thing that God was speaking to them through all of these different regulations or commandments is he's saying, don't forget that I am a God who dwells with you. That I am a God of kindness and righteousness and justice. I am a personal God who literally will walk with you every step of the way. We, back from the pillar of cloud and fire, through the angel going with the people through the wilderness, every step of the way, God makes sure to help them understand you're not alone. I'm going with you. I'm dwelling with you. And so sometimes when we look at these big, long lists, we think, why is it so important? Well, obviously, some of it was cultural because some of it we don't have to follow today. But God was speaking to people within a culture and he wanted them to look different than their culture. So, what can we do today? Worship the Lord alone. Keep our hearts dedicated to him. Are we living in such a way that exudes to the world, God is a personal God. He's dwelling with us and we're with him, right? That we are one with God and he's one with us. We're not just following rules for the sake of, for the sake of power or for the sake of, looking perfect or whatever it is. We are in a relationship with a God who created the universe, who loves us beyond measure, who sent his son, who withheld nothing from us. And that is the God that we worship and serve. And to keep our hearts dedicated to him means finding that our whole life is rooted in our relationship with him. Thanks for joining me here today, friends, on Read Through the Word, and we'll see you next time. you.